Hey BookTube! Today I'm going to be going through my top 5 worst books of the year. So yeah, these are the worst things that I read in 2019. There are only 5 because while I think I had a very mediocre reading year, there weren't that many books that I actually specifically really disliked, and even on this list there's really only like 2 that I'm like really angry about, and the rest I'm just kind of like, they were just sort of bleh. So I am far too lazy to mess up my shelves and actually hold these books up, so I'm just gonna have to edit in a nice little picture. I owe these books 0 effort. Probably should have brushed my hair before we started, but again, 0 effort. So the 5th worst book I read this year was Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. This is the 5th, I think, installment in the Throne of Glass series, and honestly my dislike for this one just for the fact that it was just way too long and it was so dull, and it just felt like so much filler. It just felt like so much crap that I just didn't care about, and it was just a bit of a dive after Queen of Shadows, which is the previous book in this series, and I think Queen of Shadows is potentially the one that I enjoyed the most. And while I'm not the biggest fan of the Throne of Glass series, I still really enjoyed Queen of Shadows, and then moving from that immediately onto reading Empire of Storms, I was just like, why is it so bad suddenly? Like, I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't care about what they were doing or like where they were going. They seemed to just do a lot of travel. Yeah, it really wasn't the best. And I mean, this book, I'm pretty sure this is the one that does not have Chaol in it, which you would think would give it so many more points to making it a great book because I hate Chaol. But unfortunately, even the absence of the worst character in this series couldn't make me like this book. And I think I gave this a 2 stars. It was just, it just wasn't my favourite. Like, I know a lot of people really like this series, but just for me, this was the low point. Okay, so if you thought I was coming for like your favourite series, again, the next book on my list is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. Yeah, this one, yeah, I'm kind of annoyed to put this on here because I really wanted to like this series, and I still do want to give some of the other books in this series a go, and I still do want to play the games, and eventually at some point I'll probably watch the TV show. So like, Witcher fans, do not hate me. Like, it's fine. I don't hate the series, I don't hate the concept. I think I just really dislike the execution, and there are a few things in this book that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So I'll start by saying that this is the first book in the Witcher series of books, so the books that the video games and now the TV show are sort of based on. And this one is a collection of short stories, so you get to see lots of little bits into Geralt's past about how he sort of like came to meet certain important people, and I guess it's sort of like setting up the series when you eventually get to like the point where it's no longer short stories, because I think the next book is also short stories. And I will say, I really liked the idea, I really liked the concept, I love the concept of witches, and this has so many like buzzwords that you would think I would love it. There were just a few things kind of specifically related to the author. There is a scene in this where the author describes a mentally ill, unconscious, naked 14-year-old girl, and he like describes her breasts as part of like why she has this ugly appearance. And it's just, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Can we not? Can we not? And I know that a lot of people do say that eventually this series gets to be really good, especially for like the female characters. And while there were some interesting female characters in this, the only 2 that were sort of like really proactive both end up fucking Geralt, I think. Kind of wish that if we actually got like a complex, interesting, badass female character, that they wouldn't also be there to have sex with the main character. I mean, the opening scene of this book, I'm pretty sure, is a girl who doesn't get named till several chapters later and doesn't speak. And like, she goes up and she just pokes her breast into his eye to wake him up. Like I said, I am going to give the rest of the books in this series a go. But considering how beloved it is, I think I was just expecting so much more. And I just read this sort of like wanting to like it, but the whole time I was just like, ugh. Yeah, enough said. So, book number 3 on the worst books that I read this year was, of course, The Fate of the Tearling by Erika Johansen. This book was a special kind of bad, and I can't really say too much specifically about why, because this is the 3rd book in a 3-book series. that kind of makes it hard to describe what it is that I didn't like about this book. I will say the first book in this series I loved. The second book in this series I absolutely hated. So this installment for me was kind of like the make or break for the series. So the first book in this series follows a girl named Kelsey who on her, I think it's like her 19th birthday, she's actually the heiress to the kingdom, so she's like the missing princess type, and after like the death of her mother she was smuggled out of the capital to await the day when she was old enough to assume the throne. And it all rested on this book, honestly. I want to say like this book really tricked me into thinking that it was going to be, you know, it was going to save the series and it was going to be like a good ending, because the turn that this book took, they're all quite different in tone, and the way that this one was like set up, I really enjoyed like all the new information and a lot of the new characters. I really liked the villain in this book. I thought it was really fantastic, and like I was so on board. I was like, it's finally, like, it's picking back up. We're actually going to get like the ending that I thought the series deserved. And then the ending happened, and it is the worst, most cop-out, most pointless ending I have ever read in any book in my entire life. I feel personally insulted. I almost feel like I've been trolled. It's so bad. It's so bad. It just essentially made every single thing that you'd read up to that point entirely worthless. Without spoiling it, there's no way I can do it without spoiling it, so I can't actually tell you. But what I can say is all the plot threads, all the characters that kept me coming back, like there were so many interesting like little threads, everything, all these plot threads were open, and I was like, oh my god, there's only like 20-30 pages till the end. They've all got to happen all at once. No, the author just says, I'm not doing that. You're not going to hear about any of that. We're going to do something completely different. So you never find out. The things that you've been reading for 3 books to find out about all these different characters, she's just like, no, you don't get to know. It doesn't matter anymore. And you just never know. Oh, I am so mad at this book. We have to move on. So the second worst book I read this year is actually here, but I'm too lazy to even pick it up. It is The Adamantine Palace by Stephen Dees. So this is one, I think I read this for Medievalathon, and essentially in this world, like, there are dragons, so that is why I picked it up. And the whole world basically runs on dragons, sort of like the whole army, everyone in the army pretty much flies dragons. All the royals fly dragons, anyone who's anyone flies dragons to transport, you fly a dragon. But there's a lot of dragon riders and dragon flying, and that's like the whole thing. And it's essentially a book about like a load of like political intrigue. There is this position that's sort of like, there are a load of kings and queens sort of, and they all come together to meet to essentially find out who is next in line to be like, I can't remember the word for it, but it's basically like the High King sort of thing. And there are so many different POV characters in this, and you think that I would like that, but the thing is, so many of them are just throwaway characters. So I never managed to get invested in any one character. The POVs that I was more interested in, because there is a dragon POV in this, but like all of the sort of smaller, more interesting characters that I was into, a lot of them would have one POV section, and then you'd be thinking, oh great, I can't wait to get back to them. And then they would immediately die, and you'd have somebody else's POV, and then that character would immediately die, and then you'd have somebody else's POV. And so I'm not opposed to having characters die for basically no reason, but when you do it so many times with so many characters, when it's like, it makes the POV characters seem pointless, because usually if you have a character and you're seeing something from their point of view, it's kind of for a reason. They're kind of a POV character for a reason, and there was not really any rhyme or reason to this other than, oh, I need to show this scene, so let's just throw in this random character and show it through their eyes. And it just didn't really work, because it meant that I could never really get attached to anyone, and any characters that I did care about we either didn't see or they just died off, and it was really hard to try and say, well, who am I supposed to get attached to here? Because if I can't get attached to anyone, then I don't care about anyone, and if I don't care about anyone, then why am I interested in reading the book? And guess what? I wasn't. I couldn't care less how the rest of this series goes. I couldn't connect with any of the characters. I didn't like them. They were all very bland and kind of two-dimensional. I just didn't care, and I just really didn't enjoy the execution of the book. I thought that, you know, dragons, political intrigue, and honestly a lot of very fairly diverse and, you know, badass female characters that I really wanted to love. Like, there were so many like awesome female characters in this, but they were all just so sort of one note, and I could not find myself caring about any of the plot. Even the dragon was bland. I don't know how you make a dragon boring, but somehow they managed it, and I'm so sad about it. So yes, we finally get to the #1 worst book that I read this year, and if you've been on my channel this year, you absolutely already know what it is. So all the other books were 2 stars. This is the only 1-star book that I read this year, and honestly, if I could give it 0 stars, I might. And that book is The Bone Witch by Rin Chupeco. I picked this up and read this for the Asian Readathon, and it essentially promised like a girl who finds out she is a very rare type of Asher, which is kind of like a mage, and she's essentially a necromancer, which are very rare. They call them bone witches as sort of like a derogatory term. The Asher are sort of a mix between like geisha and kind of like Geisha meets Grisha from like the Grishaverse. It's a bit like that. And it promised that she would be going to like a school for the Asher and like training and learning her powers and, you know, that kind of thing. So that was a complete fucking lie. The book opens with the main character in the future, and so you learn that she's like being exiled and disgraced, and she's trying to bring back like these weird dark creatures that in other parts of the book you're supposed to think, oh, they're really bad and evil and they're what the Asher are fighting against, but she's resurrecting them at the beginning of the book. So it sort of leaves this question open, and then the rest of the book is her like telling her story of how she got to be at this point. But let me tell you, this girl has no priorities when it comes to telling different parts of her story, because 90% of this book is either a list of what the character was wearing and exactly what it looked like, completely in like My Immortal style, of just listing off like her entire outfit and every single detail about her outfit, or just the clothes that she was shopping for, every single thing that she ate as part of a meal. So what she had for breakfast, and then what she had for dinner, and then like all the ingredients and the different things that were part of this meal. And then when she like moves higher up in the ranks of the Asher, it's like, ooh, now I eat this for breakfast, and now I eat this for lunch, and now I'm gonna eat this food, and now I'm gonna prepare this food. And third, if we weren't hearing about those 2 things, we were hearing about not how she's doing in the school, but a schedule about what she's doing in the school. So not like in Harry Potter, you know, when you see like the lessons, it's not like, oh, you don't get like little glimpses, you don't get like a scene where she's like learning and training to fight and everything. I think there's one like fight sequence scene where she's training, but the rest of it is just like, well, first I have my singing lessons, and then I have my music lessons, and then I have like my dancing lessons, and then I have like my sparring lessons, and I'm really good at sparring, but I'm not very good at singing. And I fucking show me, just show me the training, because when I want like a magic school, I want to see the magic school. I don't want your itinerary, I want to see it. Like, so much of this book is just listing off food, clothes, and schedules, and it kept happening, and I kept thinking like, am I really being trolled? It was atrocious. And this book does have some of the worst world building I've ever seen in any fantasy book ever, and that is really saying something. And I'm going to include fanfiction in that as well, which is really stretching it. Instead of actually giving us insights into like all the different cultures, in order for me to like picture a scene, if you say, oh, they're dressed in the traditional garb of this race of people, I'm like, you have to tell me either something about that race of people so that I can extrapolate and say, oh, well, I don't know, maybe if they're like this, you know, based on this kind of real culture, then maybe I can say, oh, well, maybe they dress a bit like this. Or you have to actually describe them. You can't just name drop a fictional place and say, yeah, it looks like that, because I don't know what that is, and that isn't world building. There is also basically no action in this whole thing. The character is entirely reactive. There might be one instance in the entire book, aside from like the opening chapter, where she's actually proactive, but every single thing she just reacts to something, reacts to something, reacts to something, and after every single time she just like, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to think about it, we're not going to dwell about it, and we're literally never going to mention it again. I've read some books that I hated in the past, but this one angered me on a whole other level. World building is objectively bad, if not entirely absent, and all the fantastical aspects are just, they're very bland, and again, the character really doesn't do anything. She's entirely not proactive, and she doesn't really have an interesting monologue because she's always talking about what she's eating, or what she's wearing, or what her schedule is for today. But yeah, this is, I think, the worst book I've ever read in my entire life. Ever. Not just in 2019. And I genuinely hate it. I genuinely despise this book with all of my being. And I get, this is a really, really harsh thing to say, but when I rate a book 5 stars, I rave about how much I love it. So when I rate a book 1 star, I'm gonna rave about how much I really hate it. It seems fair to do that. I don't know, I feel like my trust as a reader has been severely betrayed by what this book promised, and it was the worst. It was absolutely the worst. So, there were the worst books that I read in 2019. I hope I didn't rant too much, but don't worry about it. My next video, I think, should be the best books that I read in 2019. So if you're looking for like a nice pick-me-up after this horrible mess, then you can look out for that, because that should be my next video. Do feel free to let me know in the comments down below what your least favourite books of the year were, what your worst reads were, and if you've done a video on the topic, you know, you can feel free to link me rather than comment, because that's fine too. And hopefully I didn't offend anyone by really trashing their favourite book, except if it's The Bone Witch, in which case I just don't care. So that's been it from me, that's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!